Okay, so we've touched on happy songs and some of the ingredients that make us feel uplifted or happy in popular music. What about songs that make us feel emotional or sad? I was racking my brains and trying to think of the saddest song I can think of, the one that really moves me. I mean, obviously there's hundreds, but thinking of a big famous song that really, even when I was 4 or 5, I'd hear it and stop in my tracks. And it's If You Leave Me Now by Chicago. I think many people would agree that is one of the most sort of heart-rending songs ever written. What ingredients are going into that song? I'm trying to think, why is it so sad? Why is it that pulls at the heartstrings so much in that song? Let's have a little listen to If You Leave Me Now. Okay, that introduction is already quite emotional, I think. But now, I'd say the third note there, leave, as soon as that comes in, it's quite sad, isn't it? And then that bit, that's quite emotive as well. And then back to it's actually a major 7 again, quite a relaxed chord. But that chord can also have a sort of melancholic quality to it as well, I think. A kind of dreamy, reflective quality. And then we go to this strange chord here. Really takes it to another level. We're talking jazz chords now. And it's quite sad again, minor chords there. Remember in Chicago, initially a kind of jazz rock band, so we're hearing some interesting jazz progressions there. It's not a typical pop music ballad, and I think that's what gives it the edge. But here's the bit that really I find sad. And back in. Oh, very jazzy, kind of low guitar solo there as well. I think it's using octaves, which is a jazz technique as well. Something very sad about that solo as well. So then it comes back to that strange chord again. So there's a lot of feelings of, it's not your standard kind of Unchained Melody, I Will Always Love You type ballad. It's there's some really interesting stuff going on there chordally that really not only tugs at the heartstrings but makes you feel reflective and kind of all over the place really emotionally. So we'll have a look at some of the chords involved and some of the notes and where they're going and how that might work. Okay, so If You Leave Me Now chords. Well, the first thing that's interesting there and immediately sets up a kind of reflective, melancholic, emotional feel is you're going from a major chord to a major 9. A major 9 is a very dreamy chord, so it's not just setting off with a straightforward major, it's going to this very dreamy chord. That's the kind of chord when I started playing the guitar that I'd hear on a song and think, I want to learn that chord. Not the straightforward major, but the stranger one, the more reflective chord. And then we're straight into a major 7. And that falls in with the, you're going from the 5th to a major 2nd note there. If you leave, which is basically the 2nd note in the major scale, falling on the major 7 chord. Now those two notes, what's called the leading note, the seventh note in the major scale, and the second note, have that very relaxing, reflective quality about them. So you've got the combination there of a major 7 chord with the second note falling on it, and that's the point at which I initially would get would feel an emotive response there on the third note of the song. If you leave, combined with a if you leave me now. Yeah, beautiful. And that the initial introductory chords, that major 9, we call it a major 9, but it's basically the major second, an octave higher. So again, you're talking about an emphasis on the second and seventh notes of the scale there. Okay, that is already setting us up quite emotionally, and then then we go to the this takes it to relative minor, but I think it's a -7 they're using there. What's interesting about Chicago, coming from a jazz rock background, let's say, is they're often using major 7s, major 9s, and minor 7s instead of your standard majors and minors, which, like I say, I think every so often you get a ballad that becomes very commercially successful, but part of its success is potentially actually because it's using more interesting jazzy versions of the standard ballad chords. So for example, we might, that's kind of standard ballad chord progression with a major, a minor, another minor, and a major. That's a standard, like what we call a 1-6-4-5 progression. But when Chicago, straight away they're introducing us to a different, straight away from the start, they're saying, oh, this is going to be something different. And instead of a standard minor, we're going to a -7, another -7, and this next part is what's called a 6-2-5-1 pattern, based on the 6th, 2nd, 5th and 1st notes of the major scale. Don't get too blinded by the science of that, but it's this kind of pattern. Hang on. It's the minor. Now often you'll hear that pattern in ballads on its own. It's kind of a jazzy chord progression again, 6-2-5-1. So it's like, often you'll hear it with a minor. Cane Gang, Closest Thing to Heaven, springs to mind. Remember that one? I don't know if you do, but that's kind of 80s soul-y ballad. 6-2-5-1 is a very common progression, going from the relative minor, which is so cool because it shares the same notes with the original major chord, the one we might call the 1 chord. Okay, so we've got this nice, but then what happens then, and I mentioned it in the introduction, was this jazzy some very strange chords having a ballad, really. It's a 9 chord. It's a real sort of jazz funk chord again. Let's just find the point. See if we can find the point where that chord comes in. It's coming up now, I think. Here we go. Total change in direction of the song here. Yeah. It kind of combines there. Then it goes into normal majors, and then it goes into minors. So you've got a sort of, ooh, something coming in there that's creating a feeling of, whoa, my emotions are going all over the place here. And that's a chord you would usually find in sort of jazz funk. In fact, we found it in Stevie Wonder Do I Do, what I did before. So yeah, very interesting chords in Chicago. The bit I'd find the most emotive is, let's see, coming up. I'm thinking when I used to listen to this when I was very young, which parts actually really hit me. Yeah, that's all quite sad, yeah. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. Now this is the bit that really gets me. Here we go. Ooh, yes. Now that's based on the second, third and fourth steps of the major scale, but they're all minor chords. You might go to a major often there, but instead it goes. Ooh, that's the difference. Instead of hitting the major chord, you could have gone da, 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 but it goes da, 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 and then we're back in. So you've got a beautiful mix there of an unexpected minor chord there. Because in the rules of music, in standard popular music, let's say, when you go up that scale, that fourth step and the fifth would usually be majors. But what Chicago do there is they turn the fourth into a minor, and that's another thing that pulls at the heartstrings. So altogether we've got a combination of dreamy chords, reflective major 7, and we'll talk more in many songs like Something by the Beatles, many other examples where a major 7 is used in a reflective melancholic sense instead of the relaxed sense I talked about before. And then you've got all those minors, you've got the strange jazz change, and then you've got the... So a lot of interesting ingredients there. So I think when we don't want to get over analytical about songs that tug at the heartstrings. I mean, there's lyrical qualities there as well, but I think sometimes we do underestimate the impact that the actual musical changes are having on us as well. So yeah, we'll look at a few more sad songs as well, but that's a really interesting one. If You Leave Me Now, Chicago.